Your goddess has no dominion here.
And we're back. What's up, guys? Connor Casey here. Sorry about that long and very unplanned hiatus I took this year. It turns out when you try to plan your own wedding and launch a pro wrestling promotion at the same time, your schedule kind of explodes, and the last thing you have time for is watching and reviewing movies. And speaking of long hiatuses, we're back with another Avatar movie, this time just 3 years from the previous installment. You know, it actually took me a while to process why I don't care for the Avatar franchise, because it's not for the obvious reasons. It's not the box office dominance, the perceived lack of cultural impact, the first one being incredibly derivative, the saccharine themes about saving the rainforest and the whales and whatnot, the weak dialogue, the inexcusably long runtimes, none of that. No, what frustrates me is that one of the best action directors of the 20th century has essentially sat out the better part of the last 2 decades to play with his blue cat people. He doesn't owe you, me, or anybody anything other than to do what he wants, but it honestly feels like the industry is worse off for it. And not just because the franchises he helped construct have gone off in some really weird directions. Like, think of all the ways action filmmaking has evolved in the past 20 years. The in-your-face shaky cam techniques of the Bourne trilogy, Nolan's obsession with IMAX, the Raid film setting a new standard for what hand-to-hand combat can look like, John Wick and its many imitators. The genre has gotten bigger, bolder, and broader, yet a voice I'd love to hear from has been off in his own little world. I'm not saying he needs to finally get his hands on Spider-Man, but imagine what his take on a John Wick style film would be. I'd love to see him take another crack at a period piece or a disaster movie. Heck, I'd be interested in a project where he has to contend with an actual budget rather than, to use his own words, the metric fuck ton of money each of his Avatar films have at their disposal. Which brings us to some possible intrigue regarding Fire and Ash. While Cameron has been bragging about 4 planned sequels for well over a decade, he's gone on record that if Part 3 doesn't shatter box office records like the previous 2, he'll finally close the book on Pandora and work on other projects. I know historically betting against Cameron is never a good idea, but it's at least possible this time around. Like I said, it's only been 3 years since the last one, so there's not some massive leap forward in terms of visuals and motion capture. And as any film critic or entertainment reporter will tell you, the theater industry's not looking so good right now, even compared to a couple of years ago. Breaking $1 billion at the box office with a well-established franchise isn't a slam dunk like it used to be before COVID. Seems like unless you're tied to one of Disney's marquee franchises, big in China, Mario, or part of a wholly unique cultural moment, the $1 billion mark is becoming a lot more elusive. Again, never bet against James Cameron, but this time around, it doesn't feel like a sure bet. So how's the movie? It's fine. It has all the same problems as the previous 2. The new characters and concepts are just window dressing for the same conflicts as before, and it ends with this long, plotting final battle sequence that, while incredible at times, starts to weigh on you as it hits its 5th and 6th phases. Normally, Cameron is excellent at pacing out things like this, but there's also a feeling that this might actually be the last one, so they want to throw everything at the wall while they still can. Up to and including a scene where a literal council of whales debate over whether or not they should be fighting the incoming whalers. I swear, the only way that scene could have been more James Cameron coded is if each of the whales was voiced by one of his ex-wives. The movie was filmed in conjunction with The Way of Water and picks up right where that one left off. But since there's no big status quo shift to take up the first hour this time around, it plays like 4 or 5 episodes of a hypothetical Avatar miniseries, complete with fades to black at the end of certain scenes. We've got Pandora's versions of sailboats getting attacked by pirates, a long chase sequence, the full introduction of the new antagonistic Na'vi tribe, a prison break, and then that big battle I mentioned earlier. All the while, our characters slowly inch their arcs forward from last time. There's a rift growing between Jake and Neytiri over their oldest son's death and their decision to keep Spider around. On top of still trying to earn his place in the Sully family, Spider gains the ability to breathe on Pandora, which creates yet another thing the evil human military wants to get its hands on. Kiri is slowly figuring out that her connection to the planet runs deeper than everybody else's, and yes, it is still weird that a teenage character is voiced by a 76-year-old Sigourney Weaver. Loke is still trying to prove his worth after his brother's death, and Stephen Lang's Quaritch is still obsessed with trying to kill Jake, even though the movie keeps bending over backwards to offer him the chance at a face turn. And despite playing a heavy role in the marketing, Una Chaplin's Varang and her volcanic tribe don't actually bring a lot to the table. You would think after 2 movies of fighting humans that an evil Na'vi tribe would be a good change of pace, but she's really just there to team up with Quaritch and create a dark version of Jake and Neytiri. It's not a bad performance, but once the military and evil whalers show up again in the second half, she takes a back seat. There's also not much done with her fire motif, though I guess Avatar 3, Even More Space Whales, doesn't have the same ring to it. Look, this is one of those franchises where it doesn't make a lick of difference what I or any other critics say. At this point, you're either on board for another trip to Pandora, or you never were. And while, like with the last 2, there are some interesting ideas sprinkled throughout and some solid action scenes, I left the theater begging for this to be the end, and for the guy that gave us Aliens and Terminator 2 to finally try something else. Here's hoping. See you guys next time.